Hi, my name is Dr. Don Paris, and since I've been working in the field of radionics for over 35 years, I'm often asked, what is radionics? It's hard to encapsulate that into a very short form, but basically, radionics is technology that we use to analyze and balance subtle energy fields, which we call intrinsic data fields, or IDFs. From our perspective, all plants, animals, even environments are made up of these energetic informational fields which we can tap into remotely at a distance and then balance those fields that are out of balance. So we can analyze and balance these subtle fields at a distance, and that basically is what radionics is in the short form. Radionics is based on the concept that everything in the universe is interconnected through energy and information. Every living thing has a unique energetic signature or informational signature. And when that signature gets distorted through stress, environmental problems like chemicals in the environment or bad frequencies, it can actually pull that informational field out of balance. So with radionics, we can tune into those energetic fields or those informational fields at a distance, find out which ones are out of balance, and then use corrective frequencies to bring them back into balance once again. With radionics, we can tune into these distortions from a distance and detect them, and then send corrective frequencies back to the subject to restore harmony, vitality, and coherence back into the system. Radionics is backed by decades of empirical studies as well as grounded in quantum field theory. Radionics operates on the principle that intention and resonance and focused energy can influence the energetic state of an individual at a distance. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. Here's a very quick overview of the history of radionics. It started in the early 1900s with Dr. Albert Abrams. Now, he was an amazing genius. He was a professor at Stanford University as well as a medical doctor, trained both in America and in Germany. And he stumbled across a very interesting phenomena. At the time, they used a process called percussion on the abdomen to find out where a sore spot would be or an imbalance might be. And one day, he was tapping on a person's abdomen and it made like this hollow sound, almost like a drum. And he thought that was very strange. So he had the patient come back the next day because he wanted to see if that would happen again. And it didn't. He thought that was very, very strange. And so he thought about what was different one day to the next day. And the only thing he could think of is the person was facing a different direction. So he had them face west again, the way they had done the day before, and the sound came back. And from that, he thought that this must be some type of an electro or magnetic response to the Earth's magnetic field. He started doing more and more experiments on his patients and his clients and found that depending on which disease a person had, that resonant tone, that hollow drum sound, would find a different place on the abdomen to resonate. He was able to map this out on a map and show which diseases a person had based on where this sound originated in the abdomen. With the thought that this might be an electrical or magnetic reaction, he had the idea to put a healthy person on one copper plate and then run a wire to another copper plate and put an unhealthy person on that copper plate. Then he would percuss the abdomen of the healthy person and he would get the same response as on the unhealthy person. The problem he had is that sometimes two diseases would show up in the same place on the abdomen. So he started doing experimentation with different types of instrumentation and resistors to find out if he could filter out the frequencies from one disease pattern to another. And he was successful with that. And that was the beginning of what we now call radionic tunings. He would tune in a different resonant frequency to filter out all disease patterns except for the one that he was looking for. Time went on, he trained many people. There was a lot of suppression of his work, but Ruth Drown, a chiropractor, took up his work in the 1930s and continued his work, and then she found a way to add what's called a stick plate or a rubbing plate with an antenna underneath of it to tune into the person's resonant frequency at a distance by using just a drop of their blood. George Delaware from England had been working with Ruth Drown, but when World War II broke out, he was not able to get instruments from America anymore. So he started building his own equipment and found out through his experimentation that he could actually use a photograph of the client instead of a dried blood sample. And this worked very, very well to pick up that resonant frequency. We even use photographs to this day based on George's work. In the 1940s, T. Galen Hieronymus started building his own equipment because he was a radio engineer, but based it on the work of his predecessors. He even got the world's first patent on a radionic instrument. My good friend and my mentor, Dr. Bill Lawson, he was a good friend of Galen Hieronymus's, and he converted analog equipment into digital radionic equipment. He developed 5 different instruments, including the Digitron, the Nutritron, Vitatron, and then the SE5 and the SE5 Plus. And I worked with him for about 25 years, and after he passed away, I took over all of his work and continued with that work into the SE5 1000, the SE5 2000, and now the Universal Quantum Interface. Now, years later, we came up with an idea to make radionics more accessible and available to basically anyone. Because the SE5 has a learning curve. It's deep. You need to actually dive in and learn the processes of how to do an analysis, what are the intricacies, what are its limitations. There is quite a learning curve with the SE5 2000. So I had this idea, what could I do to make this more simple and more accessible to everyday people, maybe like yourself? So I created the Universal Quantum Interface, which is super easy to use. We have over 150 programs already in the unit or accessible to the unit. They're actually stored on the cloud, so you can just download them and use them. The other aspect that we did, because it's not designed for analysis, is that we added an AI integration to that. Now, artificial intelligence is not going to measure the energy fields or the informational fields or the IDFs, but it can access information about your particular issue and then find tunings that would be applicable to that. And it's working very, very well. Now, it's not as good as doing a real analysis where a practitioner tunes into the subject using the SE5 and creates a custom program for that individual. That has proved to be more effective. However, the AI has been working very, very well and creates quite a lot of good tunings for a specific problem. And so we've integrated that into the Universal Quantum Interface. It is also integrated into the SE5 2000, so people can use their own analysis skills and AI and work them together, even more effective. There are actually 3 different ways you can get programs running on your Universal Quantum Interface, or your Yuki. We call it Yuki for short. So you can use a pre-programmed program and download it from the cloud, and we have a lot of free programs, and then you can rent other programs for like about $4, and you get to use them for a whole month. And you can create AI programs with your Yuki, specifically to your needs. And number 3, you can actually have an SE5 practitioner that uses the Pro software, create a session just for you, do an analysis, and they can send it directly to your Yuki, just using your email address. It'll arrive right in your unit. So there are 3 different ways you can use the Yuki to run programs on yourself, your pets, your family. If you're just getting started in radionics, the Yuki is the perfect entry unit. It's not too expensive, and you can do almost everything that you want to do with it. Running programs, creating programs with AI, or having an SE5 practitioner send you a program is just really a quick way to jump right in and not have a huge learning curve. Within an hour, you're going to be up and running using your Yuki and balancing yourself and your friends and your family. So if you've ever wanted to balance more clients, protect your environment, or just make radionics easier and more intuitive, the Universal Quantum Interface is definitely your quantum edge. Order yours today and step into the next evolution of radionic healing.